It's great. It's great to hear your voice again, Greg. It's always a positive start to the day.
It's quite early here. Well, 9. It's not early, but yeah.
Well, it's early for a Saturday.
Yes, it is a bit.
Yeah, we should be in bed still. So where are you, Greg? Where are you now?
I'm based just 15 miles off Edinburgh in Lognidry in countryside, which is it's lovely. It's like 100 meters from the sea, which has nothing to do with the New Zealand seas or Japan seas. It's North Sea.
The cold one.
Yeah, it's cold. It's lovely and cobalt and cold.
Yeah. So what took you to Edinburgh?
Well, it's a long journey, man. I mean, I lived in Cyprus for a while, and then from Cyprus I moved to UK, which my partner really wanted to move to UK because she had this perception of UK being nothing, movies with Hugh Grant. I said, okay. I mean, I've been on holidays in UK in 1992 and in this small town called St Albans, and it was lovely, really, like, small houses, grass, beautiful. So I said, okay, fine. So we ended up in Manchester, and that wasn't the best place. I mean, city centre of Manchester is lovely, but when you start seeing Salford and other areas, it just starts getting a bit sketchy. Yes, I've been there and then moved a bit for another 2.5 years, I think, to Sheffield. And a friend of mine was living in Edinburgh, and I visited Edinburgh. And I was like, whoa, this is really like what I remember from Europe. Because, North England is, it was developed mostly during the Industrial Revolution, so it was the approach to architecture was very fast. I mean, of course, not city center when you have lovely buildings, but everything around was really like fast building, small houses, red brick. When Edinburgh is compact, it's very compact. Sometimes in the city center, like on one of the streets, you can see buildings built on the top of the buildings, so you'd almost have like, the 18th century's high towers. So the density of people living there is big. So you can walk. You don't need really public transport, but because of that, it's all old as well.
What's your connection to architecture? You jump straight into talking about architecture. Is that something that's really important to you?
Well, I have a master's degree in something which can be translated like architecture and house building. So that's always something which is close to my heart to look at those things from this perspective. Not really like analyzing it, like power towers, what they do, why the building doesn't collapse, but just in general. And I guess it's a sentiment as well, because UK architecture is different, and there's so much variety between beautiful buildings and ugly buildings. It's very interesting landscape to look at.
So you studied architecture originally. Was there anything else that you studied at that time?
No. Well, I did that, and then in last years of it, because all the landscape of construction changed, and it became faster, and the money stopped flowing to the construction industry. So I started another faculty at the university, which was basically back then, I guess, graphic design or something around those names. I'm 47, right? So that was a while ago, right? And the names were completely inadequate than now, But yeah, it was in the realms of graphic design and interaction design.
Wow, and where did you grow up, Greg?
I'm originally Polish, so I grew up in a pretty small town, in the center, in the west-south part of Poland, which was about like 200 kilometers from Berlin. And then I moved to the bigger town called Zielona Góra, which I basically studied there and stayed there. And all my journey started from there.
Yeah. How did you find yourself in terms of growing up in Poland? I mean, what was that like back then? What was your experience growing up in a small part of Poland?
It's well, you see, it's interesting question, especially in the current climate. Mm-hmm. So, because of my age, right? You can imagine that I grew up in the times which were really times of the change between, and I feel it's fair to say that Poland was occupied by Russia by then. It was well, especially during the martial law in 1981. You could see the massive influence of that. And I grew up in these times, and I grew up mostly with the movies which were war movies. It was always war, but it was Second War, right? So that's what we grew up in the movies which were showing pain, which were showing loss. And that's where, I guess, even in my music you can see that, right? That it's always like, there is always some kind of sadness, even if there is hope, there is sadness anyway in it. But there was a change later, of course. But I remember the night when my mom was actually involved in Solidarność, which was this movement which basically contributed hugely to collapse of communism in Poland. Massive change. And my mom was she was participating in this movement. And I remember one night, about 4 a.m. or something like that, the police came to our flat. I was living with my mom only. And because it was small town, so sort of the people were a bit more, how to say, friendly. You didn't, I guess in bigger towns the police would take you and you could end up somewhere, God knows where, depending on how high you were in the ranks of Solidarność. But they basically told my mom, like, or she will stop or I will end up in orphanage. So she had to stop. But it was another maybe 1.5 years and everything just collapsed, right? I mean, the communists collapsed. And
that's incredibly fascinating. I mean, just hearing that from you, I mean, the reason I was just before this call, I was talking to Simon how right now I'm in Wellington. It's a city of 300,000 people, and we have the biggest, as far as I can tell, the biggest protest, ever taking place right now at the Parliament, and the media, the general public, everyone absolutely hates what's going on there, but the protest is still happening. It's this absolutely strange time where you've got this movement, this popular movement, yet it's labelled as unpopular and, aggressive and all of these things. And who knows what's going on? It's very strange, and I can feel it in the air. So for the last week, it's been happening. They're literally camped. They're camped outside of the Parliament buildings for thousands of people. And it's in the air. I can feel it, and it's happening in Canada. It's happening in the United States. Happening all over the world right now. It feels like a revolution of some sort. I don't know. It's the first time in my life I've ever felt that.
I see. Is it actually related now with COVID mostly?
Yeah, it's really about rolling back a lot of the restrictions. People internationally, people aren't aware that New Zealand has a very strict restrictions still. We still can't do a lot of things. There's no travel. People can't get into the country very easily, and people have had enough. COVID's come through, and they've just sort of said, well, we'll just live with it. And I think that's what's happening in the UK now, but New Zealand is still locked off from the rest of the world. It's very strange.
Yes, yeah. You see, I guess it's the main issue here is that, which no one talks about, is that there are like I work mostly in IT industry, right? So we are very fortunate, right? But no one, and there's a large group of people who are fortunate and can still do the work and make money, and there is a large group of people who cannot make any money. And there were some grants from government, sure, but they weren't like, they lower your standard of life. But it's in places like Canada, States, maybe, I don't know. It depends on Europe is very like socialistic in this space, so they will try to give you some money, right? But the other places don't. So people just, how long can you run on, $5 a month or something like that?
The government didn't step up enough in those places. Even the UK though, like many businesses have closed down now. So many small independent businesses are just shuttering the doors because they can't survive. Yeah. It's so sad.
Well, yes, in UK plus Brexit as well, right? I mean, silly things like even selling on Etsy to European Union is just like, you cannot really do it. I mean, if you sell something more than, I think, £125, then there is customs on it.
No, it is interesting though I hear your story of sort of growing up through those changing times and turbulent times, because I think a lot of people aren't aware of the zeitgeist or the kind of feeling of what it was like at that time, and they just assume that whatever it's like now is what it was always like. But there was a point in time with the Soviet Union where a large part of Europe was under the umbrella of this, this communist regime.
Yeah.
Countries that had, even World War II originally, it was started with the invasion of Poland. And it was an independent country at that time, and at the end of the war, it sort of just got sucked into the sphere of communism, and it was not independent.
And what was the most sort of the most ridiculous fact was that after the war, of course, Poland was sort of like friends with Russia, right? And I don't mind that. Okay, it's not. The thing is, when people say Poland and Russia friends, it's about people were friends, right? But it's about the governments who were leading it, right? So when the war started, actually Germans attacked from the west and Russians attacked from the east. And then you have a paradox that when Germans actually attacked Russians, then Russians became, Poland became friends with Russia and beat up Germans. And those things weren't in school. On history lessons, you couldn't. It wasn't like that. It was like, just Germans attack us, and then magically sort of we got friends with Russia, which before first war. Yeah, we had constantly the wars. Okay, listen, I need to take my cat because it's really like, want to go to sleep. Okay, go there. Don't make noise.
No, well, and that's fascinating. So you grew up in that environment. I mean, what would you say at that time growing up were big influences for you? What was the in terms of film, music, things that inspired you growing up in that time? What sort of influences came into Poland?
Well, Poland has... really, really good. Back then, times changed probably, but back then, as you may imagine, all the new movements of movies were very, very Art Nouveau, I would say, and because people were under censorships constantly, they were trying to find the ways how to express themselves without being banned or seeing like anti-governmental. So sometimes they were going completely off the topic, which then was seen as experimental. But sometimes they were talking about just normal life people, and you have lot of Polish directors who started back then. Like Agnieszka Holland, like Kieślowski, like all those movements were actually talking about because those were really young people as well, right? So they didn't see they didn't want to go into talking about government too much. They were talking about how young people feels in this constrained under umbrella places, and they were going deep into sort of, I guess, everyday life, but trying to grasp some kind of deeper problems of this life without really talking about government as such, or what the pressure is and what the constraints are. As well, music. I mean, for years, music was quite good, especially classical music. I mean, yes, not especially. I'm talking about classical music in Poland, and we have a lot of people. And again, look, like even Chopin, right? He had to he left, right? He was the emigrant, right? There were a lot of people who had to actually grow up in Poland, experience all this pain, suffering, seeing everything was going around, and they couldn't flourish, and they had to leave the country to be recognized and to be successful in what they love to do.
You were in a band, right? Is that right?
I was in a band. Now I'm just have my own sort of like gig going. But I was in Poland. I was in a band. We had a band, but nothing. As you may imagine, nothing very successful.
Interesting. You mentioned that people have to leave Poland to kind of become successful elsewhere and then come back. Sounds a lot like New Zealand.
Yes, of course. There's always there will be always argument. Of course, like everywhere. I mean, this is my perception and my experience. Of course, I didn't grow up in any wealthy family as such. I didn't have many connections. Small town doesn't help you with that. Of course, there are successful people in Poland. Okay,
sounds a lot like me.
But that's what it is. That's the nature of us, right? It gives completely different angle. I always say, I always think that when you need to go through all the small details of everything, and you go through struggle of getting anything right. If you have everything, you will become the concert pianist, right? But if you go through the struggle, you will become a musician, even though you still use the piano as the instrument. And I think that's the biggest differentiation. Right? Not necessarily successful musician, but
struggle is really important in life, right?
It's like hardening the steel. You just needs a bit of stress and that to just really make it what it needs to be.
Look, it depends what the audience is as well, who is listening, right? But young people, let's say people till I guess 35, 30, right? They will see words still differently than when you're getting older. When you're getting older, you start seeing all those patterns and how bad experiences help you to be where you are. Because if they wouldn't happen, you couldn't, well, you weren't forced to do something, right? Unpleasant, which actually changed your perception later on. I watched an interview with David Bowie, and he said, like, the young people are coming and want to take over the world, and they think they're in the power, right? And then they realize after some time the new wave of young people is coming, and they say exactly the same. And I guess that's the circle of life, right?
Yeah. I'm interested in talking about your album Valeria. You worked on for a long time, and it sounds like a lot of the concepts that you've just discussed around the idea of sort of pain and suffering and kind of going through that journey of life have manifested themselves in this album. I'd be keen to just hear a little bit more about the story of it and where it came from.
Yeah, so the way I actually compose the albums is I just get couple of tracks down, and then the way I feel about them, I start making stories. So it wasn't like I had a story in mind and then I produced sort of music for it. It was the other way. It always is, actually. And then even the order of the tracks, it depends on the story which shapes in my head. So if you would ask me at the beginning what's the story, I wouldn't know. But then I have like first glimpse. Let's say there's a couple. For a long time I didn't know if she was gonna die or he is gonna die. Fun fact, right? But then I realized, okay, let's kill him. And then the tracks dictate that, So the scene, let's say in the hospital, this with the bells in the background, it's all very visual. I always try to look at it as a story, and but the tricky bit was not to make it like a musical theater. So I'm not sure. I hope I did pretty okay with that, and I didn't exaggerate it. But yeah, it's a nice way to expand on the music by adding effects and words to just make it more rich. It's a very sad story, to be honest. I know for the fact that if people listen too much of it, it puts them in a bit of depression mode, and I completely agree. It's not the lightest one. Like all the movies I remember from my childhood, they are pretty heavy to digest.
I did want to talk a little bit about your inspirations for this as well, but more like, which artists inspire you, because I was listening to the album last night, and track number 6, Shattered Glass, which is the track that you were just talking about with the hospital. You had that machine sound in the background that sort of like pulls you into this hospital atmosphere. That track is really standout. Like when you're listening to the album, it just suddenly like jolts you awake, and you're like, wow, like this album is incredible. It really tells a story.
Thank you.
I was kind of hearing little hints of maybe like Clint Mansell, the guy who writes all the music for Darren Aronofsky movies. Are you inspired by him at all?
Oh yeah, I love this guy. I think he's amazing, and he as well. I mean, he had some heavy stuff in his life in last decade. He went through the heavy shit in his life, and I knew this story. And actually, I think there is a fraction of his life in this album as well. You could say that because, of course, all the small details influence everything. In general, well, there's so many lovely artists out there like Max Richter or Ludwika Naudi, right? But Max Richter, I would say, is much lighter, and he's amazing, right? And Ludwika is very happy as well, I would say. So I'm just now moving, I think, more into the next album, which I almost have. It's much more happy, I would say. I hope so. I don't know. It's gonna be lighter.
Did you intentionally do that? Did you intentionally want to make it happier, or is it just a product of what came out of it?
I think there was change in me as well, but I was trying to sort of poke myself, like just make it a bit like because I compose like at 2 a.m. Okay, I go to sleep, then I cannot sleep. I get up, I sit in the front of the piano and I compose. And my way of composing is I do not write the notes. So if I do it and I remember it next day, it just passed. If I don't remember what I did, how lovely it was, then that means it wasn't that lovely. And that's my way. And then I sort of, like now I have 8 tracks which I can sit down and play, of course with mistakes like everyone, right? But that gives me the structure, which then I can create the album based on that, or add maybe something in the meantime.
So that's a very much like reactive way of writing music, right? I guess the story comes after, but you've also done, in the same way as I have done music for Cody's photos, right? And I think that's how you two met. Like you did a soundtrack for one of Cody's photos, is that right? So
yes, in that
and that way is a very different way of composing, right? You have an image in front of you which is telling you a story or talking to you in some way, and then you're making music for that. So I guess, are these 2 different composing styles for you?
Yes, but in fact, so first we met with Cody much earlier, like ages ago. I don't even remember, but ages ago. And the other one, not necessarily. So what you would suggest is that the music is really referencing to photos only. That is not entirely true, because Cody, what he had like a snippets of 30, 40 seconds recording of the field recording of the place. So it was a mix of field recording and the photos.
That's right.
And the story. And the story which was there.
Fireworks in the Rain.
Yes.
That was the first one, I think. And I had
and there was basically, I read the story, right? And there were a couple of photos. So
it was quite a beautiful kind of collaboration, because I've always felt my work, even though it's photographic and everyone calls me a photographer, really it's a narrative based and it's about stories, and I always was telling stories before I took photos, and so to come back and have someone really appreciate and kind of engage with that side of it was really quite powerful, and I think the track that came out of that was very powerful, and it was beautiful.
It's a good word, narrative. It's a good form. So it's almost like I saw the micro movie, you know, only limited amount of frames, very short audio, and the story which I read, like a script. And we didn't even say like, oh, can you do audio for that? It wasn't like that. It was, you just show me this stuff and I just sat down and just did it. I just had some evening because I felt like it. That's it.
Yeah, it's quite spontaneous as well.
I resonate with that a lot. That's how it happened for me as well when I first saw Dante Dreams back in 2017. No?
Or maybe 18, yeah.
18, yeah, maybe 18.
No, it's beautiful to kind of come together with someone and collaborate and to feel that connection, and it's very rare, and having found it now and knowing what it's like, I really appreciate it as one of the beautiful things in life, is to have an artistic connection to another artist, another soul in a way, which goes beyond language in many ways.
So how did you two meet?
I mean, I think it was over Twitter, but Greg makes it sound a little bit more poetic than that. But we were just maybe chatting back and forth and found each other, followed each other, and from different sides of the world. But
yes, you were in Japan back then. You were in Japan.
Yeah. But interestingly, in Japan, I've got a special place in my heart for people from Poland. And I don't know if this is characteristic of the whole country, but I've just in my travels, I have met a number of creators and just people from Poland, and every single one of them, I felt this sensation that they were my brother in a way. Like once we got to know each other, that they were. I don't know that we were kind of there for each other. It's I don't know how quite to describe it, but. A lot of other countries, I think, have a culture where relationships are quite fleeting and fun-loving, and kind of they come and they go. It's perhaps more of a Latin thing, but maybe with Eastern Europe in general, or potentially just Poland. But I just got the sensation that there's this kind of seriousness and depth to relationships, which I think in a way New Zealand shares that, where people, if they are friends, they're friends for life no matter what. And it kind of, if you know what I mean. What do you think?
Oh yeah, I agree with you. I think it may be something related with the fact that, you know, we both sort of like decided to go on a journey. And when you go on the journey, especially in Poland, you do not trust, your level of trust is much lower. You lower your trust because you're in sort of environment you don't know. So you need to be, you know, anxious and conscious of everything around, right? So when you eventually meet someone, and after a short moment you see that the vibes are the same and the way of thinking is the same, this is something very precious, because it's not easy to find these relationships in this environment which doesn't, how to say it? I mean, you know, when you are in your place, right? People always have, and I feel it especially when I go, let's say, to States or Canada. People, they are friendly, they like you, and they're gorgeous, right? But there's always some kind of undermining, like, what can you do for me? What can I do for you, right? This type of
transactional.
Yes, there is that, and maybe it's only seen from the, you know, from my perspective as a European or something like that. But when you go in general and you meet people that thing doesn't exist, and it's purely about if your minds actually talk the same language as such and can connect, then that's what happens. I guess that's what is exactly the friendship. There is no, what's the word? there's no like benefits of anything. You just became the friends because it's like pure friendships. Like there is something which interests you on intellectual level.
Yeah, I can completely understand that. And your comments, I think we might have talked about this before, Simon, but in the United States, the way things are, people can often be quite, very friendly and outgoing, but as you say, there is this kind of transactional nature. And I think my experience leaving small town New Zealand, not really knowing much of anything, and moving to one of the biggest cities in the world, and just kind of being thrown into that and trying to navigate that as a young man, and building relationships, learning to trust people, being amongst an ocean of people. It kind of makes you ask questions about yourself and who you are, and where you came from that you maybe didn't ask before. And it can be very lonely as well, being in a big city. Everyone's busy, no one's got time. So when you do find someone you connect with, you kind of hold on to it.
Yeah, hold on for dear life. But how do you deal with loneliness in Edinburgh, Greg? Are you is it affecting you? Because Edinburgh is quite a small city, right? I mean, like you said earlier, you can just walk everywhere. Is loneliness sort of something you have to deal with?
It is, yes, it is small, but it's because it's compact. There's a lot of people around. Plus, the tourist season is all year round. So especially like during like this Fringe, which is 1 month festival, I mean, man, you just want to go and leave. You just want to leave. You don't want to be anywhere because it's just people and people and people. Well, Edinburgh is relatively small, but there's so much stuff here, like so much stuff. I mean, keep in mind it is a capital of Scotland, right? So small isn't. It's cozy. Maybe that's the better word. It's cozy. But there is a lot of stuff, and a lot of stuff is happening here. And Glasgow has huge international airport. Eddie has international airport as well. There's a lot of movement here, a lot of tourists. I mean, Scotland mostly. I mean, I don't remember now. 6 billion from tourism. I think that's the income of Scotland. So there is a lot of money coming and a lot of events, mostly. Now, of course, with COVID, everything went down the drain, but it's coming back.
Well, how would you characterise Scotland, though, as a place to live, and as Edinburgh in particular, as a city and a creative city? Do you find there's people there that you can connect with, that there's a community there?
So, actually, Glasgow, for any collaboration, Glasgow is much better. There's much more artistic movement in Glasgow for younger people and for older people, which want to just connect with people. Okay, Edinburgh is more official, I would say. Of course, there are big concert halls here and in Glasgow, but Glasgow has a stage. Right, I mean, I learned Ableton in Glasgow, which was amazing. I attended this school of my friend Simon, Soma School. It was the name. Now they changed the name to something different. But it's the movement is there. The movement is there, and people want to do stuff there, right? And there's quite a lot of bands. Famous bands from Scotland as well, right? So the movement is there, but again, Edinburgh is. I mean, I can. There's no problem with me hiring like a place with 2-3 grand pianos for a weekend in Edinburgh. No problem. Those things just exist here, and you pay £50 and you have it for like 8 hours, and there are like 2 Steinways sitting there, and you're just alone. You just record what you want. So those things are brilliant. But stage-wise, like musicians and collaboration, it's much easier in Glasgow.
In terms of the city, I guess just zooming out a little bit, like recently I was staying with my grandparents, and I don't usually watch television, but there was a great show on Billy Connolly. Who's obviously famous Scottish comedian, but I found it very interesting because I think his approach to life, his philosophy, a lot of things that he talks about in terms of now he's getting kind of quite old now. He talks about sort of the kind of the soul of Scotland. And I'm very interested in that because, you've got the classic Scottish tradition, novels like Waverley, Walter Scott. There's kind of lonely Highland kind of ideas, on the North Sea. And I see connections, very strong connections with New Zealand and Scotland, and I guess Northern England as well. But this kind of idea of sort of loneliness and being kind of on the edge of the world, and in some parts of Scotland, I imagine it feels like that.
Yes, I can see that. Well, it is definitely a specific. There is something specific to Scotland and to the nation of Scotland, right? And it is a small country, which the Glasgow region is different than the Edinburgh region, and it's definitely different than the up north. But it's a lovely place. Okay, it's a lovely place to live. It's a lovely. People are amazing, but of course there is some kind of realistic approach to it. How to say? Maybe because if you're in a cottage in Perthshire, if you don't have a wood and you run out of water or whatever, or it's cold night and the water froze, the pipes froze, and you don't have a water, you will always be able to go to the neighbors and they will always have some water which you can just take, But there is realistic. They will tell you like, remember next time to make water. It's super friendly, but it's realistic. They will tell you straight, like if something is not right, okay? But they will do it in the way which is nice, which is like, yes, sort of like, yes, Dad, yes, Mom, in this way.
Wow. Yeah, I really connect with that. It's like pragmatic. It's very practical. And New Zealand is very much like that as well. And I always think, living in Tokyo, which is so meta, everything is just done. It's just automatic. People don't know what it's like to handle livestock or to make a fence or to cut firewood. And my memories of growing up in small town New Zealand, of sitting out there on a cold winter's night with the axe cutting firewood, taking it inside and it's freezing, and the houses here are thin and cold, and you've got to wear sweaters inside because it's so cold, and it's raining and it's pouring down, and there's just stuff like that which city people just don't understand. They've never had to deal with it, and so they think the food just comes into the supermarket. They don't know what it's like to make food or to have animals and that sort of thing.
Yeah. So I guess you have two big cities, right? Glasgow and Edinburgh, and they are exactly. I'm sure 70%, including students, of people living there will be like you described. But anyone else, I'm chopping wood to my fireplace here. Even though I have heating, right, central heating, but it's nice, but I use it. But if you go up north, like north, all the Perthshire or Fort William area, like west area. This is not. That's normal. That's normal that every house has or fireplace or the log burner. This is natural. You have a wood. You do that. You are prepared for everything. Of course, you go to shop and buy stuff. The nature is just amazing. In one sentence, I would love to stay in Scotland forever. But I'm not like a fish. I need warm weather, so therefore I think my journey takes me to Mediterranean now. So
when is that going to happen? Are you planning on moving out soon?
Yes, I'm moving in April. I've been in UK since 2006. So yeah. It's gonna be 16 years, yeah.
Fantastic.
16 years.
Fantastic. And where is next? Is there a country in mind, or?
I will probably touch down in Poland because my parents still live there. But I was considering Portugal and Turkey, and after, it just turned out it's gonna be a Turkey for a while.
Nice. That's fantastic. Is there something about Turkey that really draws you in, or?
I think it's a mixture of lovely people, weather, and sort of amazing climate. I guess food as well. Well,
everything.
Did you ever hear about? Let's go there. There is an amazing British restaurant. So,
absolutely not. And good coffee as well in Turkey.
I guess so. I'm trying to listen. Oh, that's another topic which probably at our journey in life we can touch. I mean, I started to have like health problems because you're just clocking a midterm and you need some maintenance, and it turned out it wasn't really like it wasn't anything like physical with my heart. It was mostly related with prolonged stress, and as we go in this let's call it maybe rat race. Maybe it's too strong, but we're going in that, right? We buy better car, we buy house, we're trying another iPad, whatever, physical items, some other achievements, and with time it just wears off, and we take health for granted all this time because it was fine, The only problem maybe we see that we cannot drink. I don't really drink anymore, but we cannot drink so much like we drank when we were 25, right? That's our reflection, right? But then, it starts coming up, the small things, which became really, really huge problem.
So have you stopped drinking coffee as much?
Well, I had two coffees for last half a year. I had 2 coffees. And it's really? Purely because it's just started giving me some kind of like, it's called endoscopic beats, which is basically you have like your heart beats normally, but then it stops like very quick 2 beats and then stops. But it became, in my case, very severe during the night, so I couldn't sleep, and then because I couldn't sleep, it just fueled it even more and more. It was vicious circle.
Since you've had that health issue, have you reflected on your relationship with sort of work and stress and that, and how has that changed since you've?
Well, as you see, Cody, it's changed everything. It basically changed everything. I decided that at some point you just need to. Okay, there will be a couple of examples, right? Or you focus on your family, or you focus on your life, or you focus what is important for you. You're realizing you make money, but you're not able to afford like this flat or house or another car or whatever, physical items, right? And you realize that it doesn't really matter, that you can live with, that actually material world starts fading when you start having, like, let's say, health problems. Everything around disappears. It doesn't matter. You don't really look at newest iPhone or anything else because your mind is so elsewhere that this material things disappear, and what matters is actually how you feel, who is around you. It's quite eye-opening, and how people around you treat you, how many friends do you have, who you can rely on. Those things become very, very important.
That's beautiful. I mean, I really think I know what you mean a little bit. Living in Japan and that whole experience, it was the rat race. It was very, very busy. A lot of people trying to be something, trying to make a name, trying to be famous, trying to do this, trying to do that. And then, a number of things happened in my life, and I ended up back in New Zealand, and then COVID happened and a few other things. And I realized that it's, the core fundamentals of family, of home, of my life's work, they took precedence. And so now I just do whatever. But it's kind of focused a lot more than it was previously. And it feels stronger than it was previously. Good,
man. I mean, I wish people, they don't really need to run any serious problems. I mean, I was fortunate, right? But there's a lot of people around you, my friends, who, got cancer, had to go through all this stuff. I mean, imagine this is like serious thing, and people don't talk about it. But you know, when you let's say when you get the cancer, you go for the screenings. But when you go for the screenings, they give you like radioactive stuff because they need to check where the cancer is before screenings. When you come back, you cannot be around your kids because you're still radioactive. So you know that is terrible for these people. Not only you start being isolated, and then you cannot really hold the kids, and everything is around. Those are much serious things. So, that changes the perspective, like how we drive ourselves to death in this modern consumptionism world.
I wonder if there is a shift in the culture now, though, where like COVID has made a lot of people a lot more focused on family and being, you know, I think one of the reasons that we're going through such an unemployment crisis at the moment in London, for example, is that everybody has left London. And one, it's to get away from being in such a densely populated city during a pandemic. But I think, two, people are moving home. And that's exactly what I did. It's exactly what Cody did. You know, we are moving back towards home. And I wonder if that's a big shift that's happening in the culture now because of this whole pandemic.
It helps, doesn't it? I mean, again, the group which can work remotely, because, they can do this movement. Other people, a bit tougher, right? But I agree with you. Yes, there is some kind of shift. I think people have maybe more time to sit and think, and and some of them will just watch, you know, some kind of streaming platforms and spend on mobile watching on other streaming platforms, and just be still how they were. But the others are like, whoa, I just woke up, what's going on? It's like one of those movies, you know?
Yeah. It's incredible. I mean, one of my greatest memories of 2020, you know, in the middle of lockdowns, you know, New Zealand got locked down hard. In fact, an illegal lockdown, that's how hard it was. But we got locked down. I was staying with my grandparents, and we ended up living with them for almost a year. And they were elderly. My grandfather was quite sick. We had a small room in the house, and it was the only house, or it's the family house that we had always had. So even as a child, that's where we had Christmas, always at my grandparents' house. And one thing I took away from that was the importance of storytelling. My grandfather's a great storyteller, and you know he tells me about the old days. He tells me about when, you know, because him and my grandmother, they met in Wellington, where I'm living now. And they lived in the suburb that I'm living in now. And he tells me about in the old days, the flying boats used to come in before they built the airport. They used to land on the water, and taking a date down on Oriental Parade and just wandering through the city and what it used to be like in the 1950s. And then he tells me about what it was like for his brother, you know, his family. My grandmother tells me about her brother's experience in the war. And they bring out the photos and they bring out all of the stuff, and they share these stories, and I'm like, man, I'm so privileged and lucky to be able to hear this, to hear my own story, to hear about the, you know, Cambridgeshire, where my ancestors are from in northern England, and you only get that from prolonged exposure to people.
Yes, amazing organic thing, isn't it?
You know, and it makes me think, man, I'd really like to come to England one day and explore my hometown, my ancestral home, and see what it's about. You know, meet my people.
Yeah, it's a nice thing which you said about this. Yes, sort of absorbing the knowledge and the origins of what it was like. You know, I think what happens now because of the technology, if you want to find out some information, you just have a very straight point to it, right? You go to the search engine or whatever, and you go, and the answer is there. What would happen 20, 30 years ago, you would like to find out about something, but you would find the book, and you read all the book, and then you have a reference points a day, and you go to one of the reference, and then you find more, and you find more, and eventually you get to the bottom of the topic, where now you can do it in 6 seconds. So what you're describing is exactly that. You sort of like had this going through the books of every situation, every small details, which actually give you the full picture, instead of just, hey son, he was, now he's the airport, 30 years ago there wasn't any airport. Okay, good. So what year was the airport built? 90, whatever. That's your answer, right? But you get everything around.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because I think that concept, which I would broadly say fits in the concept of derive, this kind of wandering, feeling a place, seeing the little details and the big details, and kind of just feeling the essence of a place and what it was and what it is, which I believe is a concept that maybe draws the three of us together in a way as creative people, and we all sort of feed off that, I guess.
Yeah, that's true. I've just noticed you may hear like a whistling sound. This is my 18 years old cat. Okay.
It's okay.
I like having that as a background.
She's too close to the microphone, and I hear her. Yeah,
it's all right. We can't hear it. But what about let's shift gears a little bit here, Greg, and I wanted to talk about what is your perspective of success? What does success mean to you? You've done a lot of things in your life. You've worn a lot of different hats, and you've had a lot of different jobs. And what is success for you?
Oh, this is a very fundamental question of existence, isn't it?
Deep.
I guess it really depends what age are you at, right? For me, I guess the successful living is when you're happy, when you do not concern with the money too much, and when you get up in the morning and maybe just one thing hurts.
Only one thing.
Only one thing. There was a joke, if you wake up after 40 and nothing hurts you in the morning, that means you're dead. But no, okay, I'm maybe stressing it too much with health. No, it's not that bad, of course it's not, but yes, as you said, look, we go through the stuff and we have some aspirations and we want to reach something and we want to reach the positions, mostly in our world currently, right? Or we want to be famous in our work. And we are bombarded with those stars around that. This guy just went to, I don't know, he's now selling Etsy and over the night he's a millionaire. But considering how many people is on the planet, right? I mean, this is really probably the probability of those things for us, for single person, it's less than winning a lottery. You probably can easier win the lottery than score something like that. It's just because there's so many people, so it happens. But so this chase is hard. I mean, we can reach when we can reach, and we can probably reach higher at some age, but this is a tough question, man. I think there's always, for anyone, there is always something that they can be somehow successful. And there's this, Cody, you all know that, there is this concept, Japanese concept, when there are a couple of rules. If you feel not successful, but sort of fulfilled, you need to do something. This thing needs to bring value, but not monetary value, but value to other people. What was it?
Is it?
It was a short.
I think it's Ikigai.
Yes, that's the one.
Yeah.
That's the one. I discovered it recently. It's a really good one.
Yeah, I think I can connect with that. And interestingly, a lot of Japanese concepts, and it sounds a bit cliche, but a lot of the philosophical and aesthetic considerations of Japan, which drew me there in the first place, I've carried with me since, and it's kind of been a tool in my soul, to deal with situations and to look at things and think, well, what does this mean when something happens, or the changing of nature. I think that was one of the big ones that I really noticed, was the essence of change, that it is constant and nothing stays the same, which is very much Japanese, they have this formalized in their philosophy, mono no aware and that sort of thing. But in New Zealand, it's a bit different,
Yeah, probably the same in Poland. But you see, I like this Japanese thing because it tells you that it's okay to remove the pressure from your life, which we have. And sometimes it's external pressure, of course, you can say, but very often it's us who puts the pressure on us. You need to do this, you need to do that, if you don't do this one, you're not going to be famous or whatever.
It's a different kind of pressure. It is interesting because I'm not sure how much of it is nostalgia, but I do feel that there was times when I was living in Tokyo and I was just kind of existing amongst the ocean of people. It's just like I was floating along like seaweed and I was surrounded by millions of people, and there was something quite blissful about that. Whereas being back in New Zealand, everything is a little bit more kind of like, you got to think about it independently, and there's no formalized rule, and you can't necessarily fall into that state where you're surrounded by people yet you're alone.
How did you feel back then?
I think I mean, looking back, I think there was a lot of tension, but a lot of that tension I believe was internal. It's all internal, but I was trying to be something, but I was also, at the end of the day, you are an icon. As a foreigner, it's very hard to kind of just hide behind any kind of shell. You are the shell. And so there was a lot of challenges there, but I very much look back on that period as very nostalgic and formative. And I've taken a lot of those ideas with me now, and I think the approach to my life now, a little bit more minimalistic. And I often think my dream will be one day to move back to Japan and have an old farmhouse and maybe start a little cafe in there and have a jazz record player, and have a few customers come through each day and just sort of exist. Like at the end of the road.
That was my life for a little while.
Yeah,
I really loved it. Really enjoyed it. Yeah. So Greg, just in case you don't know, I used to have a cafe in East Tokyo. Me and my wife ran this small little coffee stand, and we used to have a few customers a day. We used to have a jazz record player. We made coffee for the local community. It was really lovely. It was really nice to be surrounded by community. To be supported by community in another country, I guess.
Definitely, yes. But as well, it proves that it can be done, right?
Yeah.
You don't need like massive amount of money and everything else. You can be happy and you can do what you do.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I think there is a wider global, I guess, unraveling of this kind of this myth of success, of money, of all of these things, which is, it's because it's all over the show. It's all over the show at the moment, and people are sort of asking questions. And that's why exactly right now in New Zealand, there's people camping outside of Parliament asking these questions. There's a general sense of unease, of something's not quite right. People are not really sure what to do. Things aren't working out the way they should. And I think the world's ripe for change. And I'm hoping that authentic storytelling, a kind of return to a simpler way of doing things, will hopefully help out.
It may for some times, and then there will be new wave coming, probably.
Oh, God. Yeah. Please no.
But listen, it doesn't matter. What matters is what actually we do, because we cannot dictate those new waves of living to other people. And there will be new wave of younger people who basically want to do what we did, right?
You mentioned earlier you do a lot of writing. You write a lot of music, sort of early morning, late at night, sort of a thing. But would you say there's anything else, over your career that you've found in your creative routine, or a kind of a habit that you contributes to your work?
To my current work, I don't know, man. I mean, I think I've done so many things, and I think there are always some kind of fraction and habits which come out of them, which contribute to what we do next, right? Because I did a lot of graphic design and interaction design with Flash, and I was quite even popular at some point. with some games, when even Disney like bought the game from me, and you know I was speaking at conferences and other stuff. And that's why I'm saying it feels like we look at some people who are famous and we think like they have everything, and then it turns out that when you get to this point or close to this point, it's not like that. It's hard work, and you need to pay for your hotel and sometimes flights to speak at conference. But you know, people think you're like, oh yeah. So those things. I work a lot for financial organizations as well. That gave me a different point of view on money itself, and how to manage money and how to organize even things. But I think the best lesson is that you cannot get anything overnight, and consistent trying, because we have something like we think we want to do this one, right, and it's going to be amazing, and you see it, people like they get so hooked up and so excited, and they never do it, and they just park it after a couple of weeks, and then they live with this, and I'm guilty as charged with that, and I was living with this guilt that if I would try that, I probably would be successful. So what I started to do at some point, I started to, in as quick as possible, get to as much as possible of this thing which I wanted to try. So I wanted to be a concept artist for games. And I did try that, and I hired even the guy who was my mentor. After 4 lessons, I was sure I don't want to do it. Like I was 200%, this is not for me. I'm not gonna sit like for 2 days and paint one drawing, you know, which will maybe end up in production. This is like, no. So this is important to try these things as soon as possible to some extent, right? And this is, I guess, another thing. As growing, if people grow up in an environment when there is like limited amount of money, from the childhood, you're sort of like, you cannot try things. And you start growing up with this feeling that if you could do this, you will probably be basically with regret. You constantly like undermine yourself with regret, like I could be good at this, or maybe that, or maybe why I couldn't do it, you know? When you try it, you see people who can try it, you know? They see, this is not for me, this is not for me, and they start eliminating, and that's easiest way to get what you really want to do. So I guess that's what I learned. That's the lesson, which is good, and the fact that nothing happens overnight. And if you like something, you need to dedicate some time, like month or 2 months, and try to be persistent. And every day or every week, try to do even 5 minutes of it, you know. But do something in this direction, and or it's gonna work, or you will realize that it's not for you, and this is good as well.
Yeah. I remember I was having a phone call with you, Greg, probably a year or 2 ago, and I remember you said to me, Cody, you're never going to be Justin Bieber, but if you keep going for another 10 years, people are going to read your stuff and they're going to see your photos, and it's going to change their life. And I think about that a lot, because you know there have been opportunities in the past for me to kind of try and do things the quick way, or to just kind of go and just, you know, try stuff out, and I've tried things out, but I've always come back to that sort of idea of the long game and creating monumental work, you know. And you look at things like, or you know, people like Chopin and musicians or artists, authors whose work transcends their own life even. And you think, man, this is, you know, there was some value, there was some kernel of truth there that means that story or that piece of artwork has remained in our cultural vocabulary, which in this day of just instant ads and instant communication, stuff just disappears, you know. So I do think about that quite a lot.
Good, because it's still a valid point. It's still going to happen. I guess your moves were very limited with COVID, but at the same time, you could think about it more, right?
Yeah, and I think some of the storytelling and the writing that I've been doing since that period of COVID has been some of my best work, you know, and it goes deep. And so that period of travel, which happened, you know, it was a very, it was sort of the summertime, the springtime of travel and getting around and doing things. And even places that I went, places like Hong Kong, which today, if I was to go there, I imagine would be vastly different to when I went last time, you know, with everything that's happened. And I feel this sense of kind of remorse and regret in a sense that it's changed, but also this acceptance that change is inevitable. So yeah, I look forward to, you know, traveling again, obviously, but this period has been incredibly valuable, and I think maybe for Simon as well, perhaps, you know, or for all three of us, we've all had this period of kind of reconciliation of our lives in a way.
Yeah, I think so, and now I feel like I'm also creating my best work. I hope I can say that. But it, you know, going back to what you said, Greg, like it does take a long time, and even when I'm releasing albums now, even if I just get like 1 or 2 more listens than I did last time, then I feel that's a success, right? Or if I make 1 more sale than I did last time, that's getting a little bit better each time. Maybe it'll take 20 years for me to become like Justin Bieber, but
no, we don't want to become like Justin Bieber. He has his own agenda, and that's the thing. Look, Simon, what is more important is that you actually the listens aren't that important, and I will tell you why in a moment. What's important that you're releasing another album. This is the most important. This is fundamental thing, because if you look at any artist you like, maybe not electronic, but any artist you like, and you start going on Spotify, the rabbit hole of when was their first releases, when you listen to their first albums, like 1, 2, 3, you're like, whoa, okay. You know, you see this, that's what my strategy is. If I won't be like, if it will not pick up when I release the 4th album, that means I probably can just play the piano in the evening for myself or for my family, okay? But you see that those people went through the hoops, and, you know, they went through this struggle, and imagine, I mean, we are living in different times, okay? It's much more pressure, what I mentioned before, you know? That you look at other people, and even on Spotify artists, you can pick any artist and compare to your timeline, and you see like, oh my God, they had like 5,000 a day or something, or 50,000 a day, you know, and you just become depressed. And the same happens for kids and for women when they look at the magazines. We went through it, but it's still going, right? They look at they look at the magazines, and then they try to replicate the airbrush on their faces, you know. So look at it from this perspective. It's exactly the same. The pressure, which blocks creative process.
Yeah, it really does. And also, like, you know, people's lives on Instagram, comparing your life to people's lives on Instagram is just a futile experience.
Yeah, but if you see, like, I mean, people say to me, like, look, this person, right, they are divorcing, let's say, right? But the photos on Instagram, like, they are in love.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. Like, it's like this joke one of the comedian made, where this guy played. He did the funny interpretation of Arnold Schwarzenegger in one of the things when they replaced, like, the replacement of the face, real time replacement. But he said the joke that he went to the date, and this girl arrived, and he is like, is the Instagram girl coming as well? You know, so yes, that's what it is. It's so artificial, unfortunately. I think it's changing. It's changing a bit, but I can see on TikTok that people start, because of course we are not the target audience of TikTok, right?
Yeah.
We mostly we may consume, but we don't produce. But the younger generations are producing. But you see that the girls are like, look, those are the filters on TikTok, right? Look how I look, and look how I really look, and they're showing that. So there is some kind of movement to get rid of this artificial thing. But, you know, Justin Bieber, poor Justin Bieber. Anyway, any artist who has advisors, they will be advised, you need to be properly, everything needs to be done. Oh, what do you have here? A scar? Oh no, let's Photoshop it, or let's remove it, you know.
Well, that's the thing, is you lose your creative freedom. You're just a brand, and it's perhaps true that there's not even a Justin Bieber. It's just this construction, and
brushed construction.
And so, in fact, what can happen is, success is achieved early on, but it's like, the apple is still green. It's not ripe, but it's made into this thing, and that's what gets sold. And it can often be very juvenile. It can be very, it's not ready to kind of fully explore the idea. And I think these kind of bigger ideas which we're exploring around, belonging, place, our connection with things. There's very kind of fundamental concepts are just emerging now, and it takes time for that to come out. But taking a pretty photo or making a catchy song is, that's kind of like the beginning level, and there's some fundamental techniques there, I think, which are important. Understanding how things work, but actually exposing the artistic idea and really diving into it and spending time with it, and then releasing that is. Some people don't get the opportunity to do that, and it's, in a way, it can they can spend the rest of their lives trying to look for that.
It's a bit sad, isn't it?
Well, that's pop culture. It's just sort of the machine. But
yes, a lot of tracks are just produced to be attractive, right?
Yeah, well, I mean,
that's why people call themselves producers, right? They try to find a good riff and then find the artist who can meet. Yeah, they are produced. They are like movies, almost. That's what goes into it. It's not there's an artist and the artist is doing something. But yeah, you're right. Manufactured a bit.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's the machine, and there's a lot of philosophy and literature around this idea of the kind of production line of culture, which, in a way, with everything happening in the world, maybe we are, maybe it's the dark before the dawn as we enter this new world where things are decentralized. Small independent creators can work on stuff and sell it and do it without having to be, a certain way. Who knows?
Well, my idea, let's say, about the crypto thing. I mean, crypto, of course, is broad topic, right? But if you look at NFTs, NFTs, you see, that's like, are NFTs with us in this room? There was this man going around. Are those NFTs with us in the room? It is. I mean. It is a mix of popularity of crypto as such, and that's why and people investing in it, and that's why the NFTs could be sold for such a ridiculous money. But the thing is, I'm looking from the financial experience, right? This is just equivalent of the money. What they are sold is in coins, which are digital coins, right? But they are not exactly worth this money. But people talk abstractly like, oh, this is so much dollars. No, it's not. Sometimes you cannot even take this, crypto from the exchange to your bank. Therefore, they are really like fluffy stuff. But people just jump on it, and it's like this hype. And again, it's like more like the world is splitting. Okay, all the American hemisphere, whatever, this is just hyping, like, yeah, you will make so much money, why not, everything can happen, and the rest of the world is mining it.
Oh, God.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. For me, it's symptomatic. I think the NFT, crypto, all of that stuff, in terms of its relationship with the artists, I do have a different opinion about Bitcoin in particular, but for everything else, I believe that it's indicative of a search for authenticity. And something different, and people saying, well, we've got this NFT, it's enabling the artist, but I think really what it is it's a reaction to the way things were, which was an absolute commodification of art,
of everything
through Instagram and that sort of thing. So I don't believe it's the answer, but I do believe that it is the beginning of the search for the answer, which is
it is something. Yeah. Because look, if you look at it, I mean, all the nonsense of it belongs to you and whatever, and it's unique. I mean, we know that's bollocks in digital world, right? Yes, officially maybe, and yes, of course, if something would rise in the price to millions, you would, in theory, could prove that you own it, right? But that's, as you say, that's not the point, right? It's the point that now, if you want to sell art, or before pandemic, you had to go to the gallery, you had to have the agent, they would need to approve you, and that sort of this decentralized thing breaks those things.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a movement for decentralization and more generally, like I think mass media, like mainstream media, have definitely proven with COVID and everything just how full of shit they are. But pardon me there, but I believe also financially, Bitcoin maybe it could be an option for just currencies that are being printed into oblivion. But that same concept is also bleeding into art and into artists and people just looking for what's next, and as the world, the whole world's looking for answers right now. And again, the people camping on the lawn of New Zealand's parliament tonight, they're looking for an answer. So we'll see. But,
Yeah.
That's good. Well, look, Greg, I really appreciate you taking the time to jump on this chat with us. I know it's...
Thank you for this lovely chat. Thank you.
No, I always do enjoy our talks, even the one-on-one talks we have. I do really respect the work you're doing, and I don't know, I find it very grounding to just listen to you talk.
Likewise.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're a very positive person, but your music is very negative. I'm very shocked. It's quite... Or not negative. I shouldn't use the word negative. Your music is not negative, but...
it's
melancholic.
Depressive.
Introspective.
Depressive.
Yeah.
You see, that's what I'm trying to change. That's what I'm trying to change. My music makes kids cry.
Yeah, I mean, there's a certain feeling though, because I mean, I often think about my own work, like, well, what's the feeling it elicits, and the thing I always come back to is that moment of like exploration and curiosity and wonderment. And I'm not always like that. Often my life is actually kind of like, oh shit,
Yeah, but you know what your work is, what's the impression of your work, right?
Oh, do I? Yeah, that's the impression I give, I hope. It's sort of...
Well, okay, so can you imagine when you look at if you would find the photos from your childhood, let's say, or from your, sort of like teenage years, and you look at it and you look how other people are young or whatever, and you just start connecting those nights when you're playing with something and it was cool, and first bottle of alcohol, all those things. That's exactly how your photos come out. You look at them and you had this nostalgic feeling. It's like those things are like now, but frozen in time, and this is the magic of it.
Thank you. I mean, I think nostalgia does play a part in it for sure. And I often think back to those childhood memories, the wonderment, the sort of the awe for existence and place, and just wandering around, and nature primarily, but just exploring places.
It's the same feeling. I not exactly mean that when I look at your photos, it takes me back to my past. It's the same sensation in the body.
Yeah.
When I look at them.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, look, I appreciate your time, Greg, and I hope we can maybe jump on another call again soon, but we might wrap it up there. But yeah, I hope you have a great day, and keep in touch.